When you hear the word sacrifice, you probably imagine something distant, ancient, symbolic. But the truth inside the Aztec Empire was far darker and far more personal. Imagine this. You're a young girl. You're told you've been chosen by the gods. Everyone around you celebrates your family, your village, your priests. They call it an honor. But deep in your heart, you know what chosen really means. Your life is no longer your own. Here's the part history books soften. For the Aztecs, choosing a sacrificial virgin wasn't random. It wasn't spiritual kindness. It was a calculated process rooted in fear, tradition, and political power. Priests scoured villages, searching for one girl, untouched, unblemished, physically perfect, emotionally obedient. To the Aztecs, purity wasn't innocence, it was currency, a symbol, a vessel, a bridge to the gods. And once a girl was selected, her fate was sealed before she even understood what was happening. Families often felt torn between horror and honor. Some cried in silence, afraid to resist. Others convinced themselves that their daughter would live on as a goddess. But none could deny the truth. The moment she was chosen, she stopped being a daughter and became an offering. Her entire identity was rewritten, her name erased, her personality overwritten. She didn't belong to her family anymore. She belonged to the state, to the temple, to the god she was assigned to represent. To the outside world, she was blessed. Inside, she was trapped in a destiny she could never escape. Some girls accepted it with quiet fear. Some resisted and were forced into compliance. Some whispered to the moon at night, begging the gods to choose someone else. But the Aztec system was unbreakable. Once chosen, there was no appeal, no second chance, no mercy. And the most haunting part? Her new life was designed to make her forget she ever had a past. Because the next stage was not just ritual. It was conditioning. Before we go deeper, remember this. To the outside world, she looked like the luckiest girl alive. But on the inside, she was living on borrowed time. From the moment a virgin was selected, the Aztecs didn't kill her immediately. No, that would be too simple. Instead, they gave her a full year of honor, a year that slowly erased who she once was. They transformed her into the living image of a goddess. She was dressed in the finest white garments, her hair braided with precious feathers, jade ornaments placed around her neck. She walked through the city and people bowed before her. But behind every bow was a silent understanding of what awaited her. Everywhere she went, she was watched. Priests controlled her schedule. Noblewomen monitored her behavior. Guards followed her wherever she walked. It looked like luxury, but it was actually a cage wrapped in gold. She wasn't allowed to laugh freely. She wasn't allowed to show fear. She wasn't allowed to cry, even at night, because goddesses don't cry. Goddesses don't question. Goddesses don't run. And that's exactly what the Aztecs wanted. A girl who no longer saw herself as human, but as divine. Her training was psychological, as much as spiritual. She learned sacred songs, rituals, prayers. She participated in festivals where crowds cheered her as the earthly form of a deity. Children touched her feet for blessings. Elders whispered prayers as she passed. To outsiders, she lived in glory. To her, it felt like disappearing. Every day was a reminder, a countdown, a slow march toward a fate everyone celebrated, except her. Imagine waking up every morning knowing a clock was ticking. Imagine smiling in public while your heart begged for escape. Imagine being worshipped by thousands while knowing you were being prepared for a final moment. No one dared speak aloud, and yet she wasn't allowed to show the truth. She had to act calm, holy, perfect. Because, in the Aztec world, A single sign of fear was seen as offending the gods. The pressure alone shattered many girls long before the ritual itself. A full year of living as a goddess. A full year of living as a prisoner. A full year of realizing that the higher they lifted you, the harder the fall. If the public year was a golden cage, the temple was where the walls finally closed in. The moment she crossed the threshold of the sacred precinct, everything changed. The cheering crowds faded, the sunlight dimmed. The world outside stopped existing. Inside, the temple wasn't just a building, it was a psychological machine designed to shape her mind, break her fears, and mold her into a perfect offering. The priests surrounded her constantly, not with violence, but with ritual and pressure. Every sunrise began with purification. Cold water poured over her skin, her hair perfumed with rare herbs. Incense burned around her until the air tasted like smoke and flowers. They whispered the same things every day. You are chosen, you are blessed, you are not like ordinary people. The goddess lives through you, over and over, until she started to believe parts of it, or at least pretended to. Because pretending was safer than resisting. Then came the isolation. She wasn't allowed to speak freely. She wasn't allowed to leave her chamber without permission. Some days she wasn't allowed to see anyone at all. Silence became a companion. Fear became a shadow. In that stillness, her mind wandered. What will it feel like? Will it hurt? Will the gods save me? Why me? But there was no one to ask. No one who could answer. No one who dared to comfort her. Priests visited her with offerings of food, clothing, and ritual objects. But their kindness was a mask. They weren't nurturing her. They were preparing her. Every ritual she performed was a rehearsal. Every song she learned was a farewell. Every blessing she gave was a reminder of the role she could not escape. And then there were the mind games. She was forced to watch other ceremonies, forced to listen to stories of past girls who became eternal, forced to hear how the empire survived only because of sacrifices like hers. They turned fear into duty, terror into honor, death into destiny. By the final weeks, some girls looked peaceful, not because they were unafraid, but because they were too exhausted to fight the inevitable. Others cried quietly in the dark, so no one would hear. And the most heartbreaking part: the closer the ritual came, the more she was treated like a goddess. More jewelry, more flowers, more songs. An illusion of glory wrapped around a crushing truth. The more beautiful she appeared, the closer she was to her final moment. When the temple drums began to echo through the city, she knew this wasn't a ceremony, it was a countdown. Nothing, not the rituals, not the year of worship, not the calming words of the priests, could prepare her for this night. It always began the same way. The drums, slow at first, distant, like a heartbeat rising from the earth itself. She knew what they meant. Everyone did. Her attendants braided her hair one final time. They painted her face in sacred colors. They dressed her in the purest white garments the empire could offer, clothing meant for a goddess or a farewell. Outside, the city was alive. Torches lit the roads.
People chanted prayers.
Families watched from rooftops, believing they were witnessing something holy. But inside her chest, there was only the pounding rhythm of fear. When the priests came for her, they didn't drag her, they didn't force her violently. No, they guided her gently, almost lovingly. That was part of the ritual, part of the illusion. She was walked through the sacred courtyard, past stone walls carved with gods demanding devotion, past young warriors standing with solemn faces, past elders whispering blessings as she passed. Every step was a goodbye. The higher she climbed the temple steps, the more the crowd roared. To them, she was a bridge between the mortal world and the divine. To her, each step felt heavier than the last. At the top of the pyramid, the air was cold. The stars looked too bright. The world below seemed impossibly far away. The priests circled her, chanting, praying, praising. She stood in the center, trembling, wishing, just for a moment, that she could run. But there was nowhere to go, no one to save her, no one to even meet her eyes with human compassion. Because in this moment, she wasn't a girl, she wasn't a daughter, she wasn't a person, she was a symbol. Then the chanting grew louder, faster. The drums boomed like thunder, the wind whipped around her. She felt her breath shake. This was the point where the ritual crossed a line, where the sacred turned into terror. Some girls tried to stay still, some cried openly, some whispered final prayers to gods who could not save them. The priests stepped closer. The crowd below waited in breathless anticipation. The night held its final silence. And in that silence, one truth echoed louder than any drum. She had been honored, adored, worshipped, but never protected. To us, what happened on that temple feels unthinkable, a nightmare wrapped in ritual. But to the Aztecs, it wasn't cruelty, it wasn't madness, it wasn't evil, it was survival. To understand why they did this, you have to step inside their worldview, a world where the universe was constantly on the edge of collapse, a world where the sun didn't rise because of science, but because the gods allowed it to rise, and those gods demanded payment. The Aztecs believed life was borrowed. The sun, the rain, the crops, the seasons, all of it required constant nourishment, not with gold, not with gifts, but with life force, the most precious substance of all. They told stories of ancient ages where humanity failed to honor the gods, and the world ended in fire, darkness, or floods. To them, sacrifice wasn't brutality, it was insurance against apocalypse. And that belief shaped everything. The state pushed the idea relentlessly. Priests taught children from the moment they could speak. Warriors were told that bravery fed the cosmos. Families were told that offering a child brought eternal honor. Fear and faith intertwined so tightly, people couldn't separate them. For the empire's rulers, sacrifice wasn't just religion, it was political control. The ceremonies reminded citizens of their place. They united thousands in shared belief. They showcased the priests' power, and they kept conquered peoples terrified and obedient. When the drums echoed across Tenochtitlan, it wasn't only a religious event, it was a message. The gods are watching. The empire is strong. Obey or be chosen. And yet, this belief wasn't heartless. In their minds, the girls chosen were not victims, but heroes, bridges between worlds, carriers of cosmic balance. The Aztecs saw them as the reason the sun would rise tomorrow, the reason the rivers would flow, the reason crops would grow. The tragedy is this: their faith blinded them to the human cost. They never saw the trembling hands, the silent tears, the fear hidden behind painted faces. They saw divinity. We see humanity, and that difference, that gap between what they believed and what these girls endured, is what makes this chapter of history so haunting, because it reminds us that even the most horrific acts can be justified if a society is convinced the world depends on them. When you're ready for the final chapter, the one where we look back at the forgotten victims buried beneath empire and myth, type next. You said, next. ChatGPT said, 6. The forgotten victims, memory, myth, and the human cost. Buried under empire history remembers the Aztec Empire as brilliant, powerful, and sophisticated. It remembers magnificent pyramids, vibrant markets, sprawling cities, and the gods who ruled every aspect of life. But history rarely remembers the girls, the ones chosen for sacrifice, the ones celebrated in song and ceremony, but whose voices were silenced forever. Imagine the families who lost them, parents who watched with forced pride, siblings who never saw them laugh again, communities that were told, "This is necessary, this is honor," and yet, beneath the teachings, beneath the chants, was grief too heavy to name. These girls became symbols, not people. Their humanity was stripped in the name of devotion, their suffering hidden behind layers of faith, art, and tradition. Archaeology and codices can tell us what happened. They can hint at the rituals, the clothing, the temple steps, but they cannot fully capture fear, isolation, or the unbearable weight of being a living offering. They cannot show the final moments of hesitation, the whispered prayers, or the tiny flickers of hope that died too soon. And yet, their story survives. In the stones of the pyramids, in the chants recorded by observers, in the echoes of history that refused to forget. This wasn't just a ritual, it was a system of control, belief, and sacrifice. It was a civilization's attempt to wrest survival from the unknown at the cost of its most vulnerable members. So, when we study the Aztecs, we must look beyond grandeur and myth. We must ask, who paid the price for empire? Who bore the suffering behind the splendor? Who was made to vanish in the name of survival? The girls chosen as sacrificial offerings deserve remembrance, not as symbols, not as footnotes, but as human beings with hopes, fears, and lives stolen from them too soon. If this story moved you, if it made you question the hidden human cost behind the glory of empires, hit the like button, subscribe for more untold history, and leave a comment which hidden story of the past shocked you the most. Because history isn't just monuments, gods, or rituals. It's about the people whose voices were lost along the way.